In our work with churches and schools and dioceses across the country, we see a lot of cybersecurity no-nos. So, in this edition of the eCatholic Vlogcast, we present 4 cybersecurity mistakes that are commonly made so you can talk about them with your team and ultimately avoid them. Hey there, and we're back with another episode of the eCatholic Vlogcast, where we're on a mission to reverse the trend of not-so-great Catholic communication. I'm your host, Matthew Kurtz, joined today by Joe Garcia. So here today we're going to talk about some common cybersecurity mistakes that we see people make, and then solutions of how to avoid making those mistakes. These are things that you'll be able to implement like with your team. If you're in a leadership position at your organization, you can chat with people about these things so that they're aware, and also you can implement them in your personal life. So the first cybersecurity mistake that we see made all revolves around passwords. We've got 3 simple passwords rules that you've probably heard before, but chances are you're breaking at least one of them. So the first rule with passwords is don't use bad passwords. And by bad, I mean weak passwords. Weak passwords are something like password 1, ! Or your kid's name and then the year they were born, or the current year, or something like that. Or some people even just have a base password and they just change it incrementally each time they need to update their password. Those are all bad practices when it comes to passwords. Don't do it. Rule number 2 with passwords: don't share your passwords with coworkers. And by that, I mean don't use like shared accounts. So like an example is with eCatholic. Let's say you have an eCatholic website, and this, instead of setting up individual user accounts for every person that needs to log in and make changes, instead you set up one generic account. So the username is webadmin, and there's one password that everybody uses, Jesus loves me 4, and everybody can remember it and logs in using that account. Bad idea for a number of different reasons. You have no accountability of who's logging in and doing what and where on the website. And make sure you have one account for each person, so if somebody leaves, you can delete their account and nobody else's account gets affected.
Rule number 3, don't use the same bad password or password on multiple sites or accounts. You hear in the news all the time some major department store got hacked, or some card company got hacked, or some organization got hacked. If you're using that same password with the same email, username and login, now you have to go change all of your passwords across all those sites because essentially your password got compromised. And so don't use the same one. A great solution that we use here at eCatholic is called LastPass. Essentially, this is a password management tool that allows us to create random secure passwords for each of the individual sites that we have to log into. So I have hundreds of different locations that I have to go create passwords. They're all different. LastPass does a great job of remembering what those passwords are, and saves me a lot of time. The only thing I have to do is create one awesome master password that I have to remember. And God forbid, if something happened to me or I died, eCatholic and everyone can log into my account still. For my personal accounts, my wife is able to just use that shared password that we have and get into our bank accounts and all those sorts of things. And vice versa, if something happened to her, I'm able to get into her social media accounts and those sorts of things to not have to go through a big headache of a process. So LastPass, look into it. It's fantastic, and it will make your life a lot easier.
When you use something like LastPass, like Joe said, you'll need a master password. I like to use actually a passphrase. So instead of a password, which is like random numbers, characters, and symbols, you can just string together like 4 or 5 non-gibberish actual words to create a passphrase. Studies have shown they can be as secure or more secure than a traditional password. So consider exploring that when you use LastPass or other password management tools. All right, that is the first cybersecurity mistake, bad passwords and all of those sorts of things. Second cybersecurity mistake is domain name confusion. Here's a story that we see happen quite often here at eCatholic. We have a parish or school employee that logs in the morning to their website. They can't get in. The website's down. So they panic and they contact us and they think it's something on eCatholic's end. Well, we do a quick 30-second investigation. We look at the public information for their domain name and see that their domain name has expired. So we say, well, you need to log into your domain registrar and put in some accurate credit card information to pay for your domain name. Your domain name is your website address, your URL, so myparish.com. Well, they look at it, they respond like, what's our domain registrar? I have no idea how to get into that. And when it boils down to it, their domain name was purchased probably years ago by a former pastor or a former employee or an IT contractor they were working with at the time. As you know, there's a lot of turnover in parishes over time. the landscape looks differently now than it did 10 or 15 years ago. And so they don't know where to turn. They've got to jump through a bunch of hoops in order to get access to their domain again. And it's just a headache for everyone.
Just make sure that you and your organization own the domain name and have access to the registrar. Just real quick example of why that's important. A lot of times what happens is these domain names will expire. Nobody knows who's controlling them. And there are a lot of companies and kind of like not good people in the world that have systems and algorithms that go out and track and see what domains have been used, and they scoop them up. So then your domain expires, you don't own it anymore. Somebody picks it up, and then they a lot of times end up charging hundreds, or I've seen even thousands of dollars back to your organization to sell your domain back to you, that if you'd have just had the information and had control of that, you wouldn't have run into that issue. So what are some solutions to keep that from happening to you? A couple questions to ask yourself. One, where's your domain hosted? You need to know where it's registered at. So a lot of times it will be with organizations like GoDaddy, Network Solutions, Name.com. If you're an eCatholic customer, we recommend that a lot. Just know the username and password for that you have access to get in and control that. That controls everything down from where your website points to your email records, essentially everything regarding your domain. The second is make sure you have the accurate login credentials for that account. A lot of times the reset email passwords will go to some person who had it before, or maybe like Matthew said, an IT contractor. Make sure you get that updated. Make sure you get your password and security questions answered so that you don't run into any trouble when the time comes to renew. If you get a 2-day renewal notification that your domain's about to expire, you want to make sure that you have the information to log in and make that adjustment. Then, number 3, know when your domain is going to expire. A lot of times people purchase domains for 5 years, 10 years at a time, and then they randomly just die one day, which obviously if you had a card set up on that, it's probably not going to be good after 5 years or 6 years or something like that. So just know when it's going to expire. If you're an eCatholic customer, you can always ask us for help. That's something we can look up and let you know when that's going to happen. So just make sure that your parish owns your domain and that it's not going to some sort of individual volunteer or a personal employee email address or some IT contractor that you have. Just make sure that you own that and have ownership of it.
Yeah, know those answers to those questions and you will avert a future crisis. Trust us. Number 3, the third cybersecurity mistake is falling victim to spoofing or phishing emails. So 2 different things in play here. I want to define them so we're all on the same page. Phishing is when somebody tries to convince you to reveal some sort of personal information via email or a text or even a phone call sometimes. So they're asking for your social security number, bank account information, or something like that. Spoofing is a bit different. Spoofing is when a hacker poses as somebody you know. And a lot of times it can be they're posing as an authority figure in your life, whether it is the pastor at your organization or the CEO at the business that you work at. We've had that happen before. And the interesting thing about spoofing is that it's not necessarily just a random Nigerian prince requesting you to send 1.5 million euros because his sister is dying. It's actually people posing as somebody that you know. And so if you're not on top of your game, you could fall victim to something if you're not careful.
Absolutely. Matthew, we actually had an example of that here at eCatholic where somebody used a spoofing technique to try to fish information out of us. And so it was kind of a double whammy. What happened is they sent an email. The email looked and appeared to come from Josh Simmons, quote unquote, our CEO. And if you have a good email system, 9 times out of 10, that's going to go straight to spam. Sometimes they make their way through, especially if you're hosting your own email internally. But what happened is that went to our support team and it basically said, hey, Doug, I'm going into a meeting and I need you to make a payment to a partner for us. Well, Doug obviously took a few steps and looked into it to make sure and verify that it was Josh. Well, it wasn't, because this person had tried to spoof our CEO's email. Didn't mean that his email was hacked. It was just pretending to come from that address. So what's nice about that is you can actually click on the little down arrow a lot of times in your email tool and see where the actual email is coming from. Sometimes it will say a random email, AOL, Hotmail, Gmail address. Sometimes it looks and actually has spoofed your own domain. So it may actually have your pastor or your boss's actual email. One way to look at that is because those spoofers don't actually have access to that email account, what they'll do is they'll put a different reply to email. So they'll try to spoof it from an actual email address, which doesn't mean it's hacked, but the reply to address will be an AOL or Gmail account. And we're going to share some screenshots for those of you that are listening in the audio format. If you want to come back to the video and find that, we'll share some examples of what that looks like on the video. So what do? We take those extra steps. We look at those individual items to make sure that we're not falling victim here. And for this particular case, Doug had a little bit of fun with them and was able to get the spammer to actually reveal their bank information to us so that we could do a imaginary transaction. We actually contacted Bank of America, worked with them to do a real transaction so they could track that person down. So we do that on our end because we're a little tech savvy. We kind of know how it works, and we want to keep those people occupied so they don't go out and attack other good people that may not know any better. I would not recommend doing that on your own unless you have some experience in that. But just be careful with that. So just keep an eye out for spoofing the emails and what to look for. And then obviously don't fall victim to any phishing attacks because we just don't give out additional information.
All right, the fourth cybersecurity mistake has to do more with social media. We've seen people will fall victim to social media games and giveaways, and they're really unnecessarily exposing themselves to potential cybersecurity attacks. So here's two specific things to keep an eye out for on social media. The first is these social media games. You've probably seen them like on your Facebook feed, where some of your friends will post 50 questions you've never been asked, and there's a whole list of silly questions, put in the answers, and then post it for everybody to see. You're probably familiar with the concept of security questions. So you set up an online account for your bank, let's say. And in case you forget your email address or your password, you set up 3 security questions. Well, going back to the 50 questions you've never been asked, sometimes peppered within those 50 questions is actual security questions that you might have set up with some of your online accounts. So some of the silly questions will be like, what's the color of your toothbrush? Or what's your favorite ice cream? Those probably won't be security questions, but sometimes you'll see actual security questions like, what is your mother's maiden name? Or what is the color of your first car? What's your favorite food? Those could be actual security questions. So when you're answering those and posting them publicly on a social media platform like Facebook, you're making yourself vulnerable to a potential cybersecurity attack.
Hey, Matthew, one of the reasons I want to point out for why that's important is those security questions are designed to give you access back to your account if somehow you lose your email address or get locked out in a way. It's a way for you to recover that account. And so what happens is if you give people that are looking for that information the answers to those questions, sometimes they can log into your accounts or hack or reset accounts just by answering those 2 questions. So it's a really bad practice. I always message my friends on Facebook when I see them answering that. Another thing to look out for that kind of falls along the same lines with this is you see those fun quizzes, right? What states have you visited? You know, what are your favorite things? And it's just like a bunch of quizzes that send you to a website to just answer a ton of questions. Don't do those either. They're designed kind of for the same thing, to sneak those questions in. But the downfall to that is actually a lot of times they're taking you to a separate website. So those people are able to track down your IP address and a little bit more information on you. And because you're sharing access via Facebook or some social media channel, they get access a lot of times to your profile name, your image, and your age, and a bunch of other things that is kind of going through that. So just keep an eye out for that and try to stay away from those.
Another thing to keep an eye out for on social media is what I would call sketchy giveaways. So just on my Facebook feed recently, there was a page. The name of the page is GMC Sierra 1500 4x4 Crew Cab. It's got a picture of a nice brand new truck as the profile image.
I do like that truck. It's
a nice truck. And the post says, we're giving you a chance to win a 2019 Sierra 1500. After sharing, register. And there's a bit.ly link, which means it's a shortened link so you can't see the actual web address you're going to. Well, this single post on this page claiming to give away a free truck has 12,000 shares. They tricked 12,000 people into sharing this. This is not a legitimate truck giveaway. You're not going to get a free truck if you share this post, and you're not going to be entered into a chance to win one. So the point is, don't fall victim for some of this stuff, because hackers will just look through the people that are obviously gullible and sharing this sort of stuff and finding people to target with a future attack. So don't do it.
And these things aren't necessarily bad in and of themselves, but now you can see where we just talked about these quizzes. Now you maybe go do some sort of truck share giveaway thing. Now a hacker potentially has access to your name and your email address if you gave that to them, so they can notify you if you were going to win. And now they can go through and look and see what your favorite color is or what your favorite food is, and potentially get access to your account. So a lot of times these things are done in tandem, so just stay away from them and don't give hackers the advantage.
So here you go. That's Cybersecurity 101. You don't need a degree in IT to implement any of these things in your own personal life. And if you're in a leadership position at your organization, have your team go through some of these things so you make sure that everyone is buttoned up and not unnecessarily exposing you to potential vulnerabilities. That's all we have for this episode of the Vlogcast. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back with you soon. Take care.